more living than others.
The broadcast is live now. So good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to our Indigenous mental health panel. My name is Sonia Prevost-Derbecker, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. We have a number of esteemed colleagues that I'll ask to introduce themselves. First, I'll introduce myself, Zongiki Kwe Indigenous. I'm located out of Winnipeg, where I've lived the majority of my life now. And I'm a woman of mixed ancestry. I have, from many years back, Algonquin, Nakota, Métis, and my mother's Dutch. And I am glad to moderate today. I'm the Global Director of Indigenous Programs with Movember. And we offer a suite of programs across the globe and supporting local community organizations to do very good work with Indigenous men's mental health. With me today is David Sullivan, Special Programs Director of Anadarko Public Schools, Making Connections. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Kukik Baker, Executive Director of Aqquimavvik Society, leader of the Young Hunters. Leader of the Young Hunters program. Welcome, Kukik.
Hey, Matna.
And Kathy Mallett, Cree Nation, who knowledge keeper and retired woman with very esteemed career. Welcome, Kathy. I should mention to our viewers that there's a delay due to the varying distance between the various panelists and the fact that this is being broadcasted globally. So bear with us if we sort of stall or wait a little bit longer for people's response, knowing that that's the case. So if I could ask our panel and to introduce themselves, let's start with David Sullivan.
Sure. As she said, my name is David Sullivan. I'm a member of the Kiowa tribe, currently located here in Oklahoma. I also have ancestry
David, are you
from
there?
the Choctaw. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay, I'm not getting David. Okay.
Okay, I'll just continue. I know we may have some technical issues, but as I said, I'm a member of the Kiowa tribe, currently here in Oklahoma. But I also have ancestry from the Choctaw Nation and a few other tribes. I'm also mixed as well. My father is Irish. And currently, I am the Special Programs Director for the Anadarko Public Schools, and that involves quite a few various programs, primarily serving our Native American students. I also am over the program.
David?
Yes. Yes. Okay. And so also providing services to our students with disabilities. And then we have a few other programs. And primarily the reason why I'm connected and here today is because of our Hope Squad program, which is a peer-to-peer mentor model suicide prevention program that was started here in partnership with the Movember Foundation 3 years ago in our community. Our community we're located in the southwest portion of Oklahoma, Anadarko, Oklahoma, in the Southern Plains region. And I've been here involved with the school district for going on 20 years this year. So it looks like there may be some issues with our moderator. So I guess we can move on. I believe Kukik was next. So if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself, we'll just continue on.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Ooh, sounds bad.
So my name's Cookie Baker. I am from Aqquimavvik, Nunavut. My dad is James Nanauk, Inuk from the Coral Harbor area. My mother is Shirley Tagalik from actually from Montreal. So I'm considered Inuk, and I grew up in Aqquimavvik, which is the southernmost community on mainland Nunavut. We're the first community north of Manitoba, so the next community, if you've ever been to Churchill, you go one more plane ride and you'll reach us. Aqquimavvik is the new polar bear capital of the world. That we like to say, because when I was a kid, we never used to have bears, and now we have bears all year round. I've worked just over 20 years in mental health. I started out as a child and youth outreach worker for the government of Nunavut. With that, I was the only mental health employee for the government for many years. I had a ratio of one mental health worker for 1,700 youth in our community. I currently work for the Aqquimavvik Society, which formed in 2016, like legally formed in 2016. I work as the executive director. We've been doing wellness work in our community since approximately the mid 2000s with wellness promotion, health promotion. I've started the Young Hunters program, which we started out as a food security program and activities for youth that turned the comments that we got back from the parents and elders and people involved were all mental health related comments where their kids were happier and engaging more, not wanting to play video games, and more interested in their culture. And so we've continued the program since 2012. The Aqquimavvik Society also have Inunguina parenting program, which is a culture-based parenting program, bringing back parenting skills and child rearing from many years ago that we put into practice today. Also a men's skill building program, Aqquimavvik men's healing group, Inuit Aqquimavvik research, which is Inuit traditional knowledge. It's like we're archiving traditional knowledge and taking what we could use from traditional knowledge and putting it into practice in modern times. We run women's programming. We have Aqquimavvik justice program and an Aqquimavvik elders group. And Aqquimavvik is a consensus building process where it can be used because it's holistic. It could be used in every area, but we're using it under justice and healing for our elders programming.
Thank you, Kukik, and apologies again to the viewers for some of the technical difficulties. Next is Kathy, a knowledge keeper and esteemed former CEO and executive director in the community. Kathy?
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. All right. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm coming to you from central Canada in a province called Manitoba, and I live in a city called Winnipeg. And I am a band member of the First Nation Fisher River Cree Nation, which is north of Winnipeg. I've never lived there, but I was married to a band member past years. And then also I am of mixed ancestry. I'm not only Cree, I'm Ojibwe, and also a touch of Blackfoot and a touch of some European ancestry as well. I come from a very old fur trade family here. A lot of my family and my ancestors worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, as with a lot of other Indigenous people here in Manitoba. And in my past, before I retired, 6 years now, I was the executive director of the Community Education Development Association, and as the director, I was responsible for running an after-school program for Indigenous students and newcomers in our city in the north end of Winnipeg here. And the after-school program also lend support to the students to make sure that they graduate from high school. We have a very, very low rate before then of high school graduates. And our program at that time was almost 5 years old. And so today it's almost over 10 years old. And we've had many, many, many graduates from that program. We also had lots of issues with our young people. We've lost a few people, young people, through suicide, and also some of their parents we've lost as well. And I also worked for at least a good 35 years here in Winnipeg, dealing with Indigenous women's issues, international development for a few years, working with Indigenous people from Ecuador. And we've worked on housing issues here. We built 2 housing co-ops, excuse me, and did a lot of community economic development. I have a community development background, and I have I'm a graduate of Canadian history from one of the universities here. And also currently I'm part of the Manitoba Research Alliance, involved with research. I worked for 3 years with the Provincial Archives as an archivist, and I really do love doing research. And so I do that now. I do a lot of my own family history. And worked in the justice area as well. We started up a 5-year restorative justice program here, worked with elders in that program, and I also was responsible for holding a community pipe, which was available for our people here in Winnipeg to use. I'm also personally a pipe carrier, and I do have a spiritual name, but I don't usually tell it in public. I share my name in ceremonies. So that's pretty much me. And I'm also a mother of 2 daughters and a grandmother of 4. We also lost a grandson at one point. And yeah, so that's me.
Miigwech, Kathy.
Miigwech.
So I'm going to start off our session, Indigenous mental health, as the topic with just a few stats and data. So of course, in every continent in the world, Indigenous people are among the most marginalized, impoverished, and victimized in our society. Compared with the general population, Indigenous people continue to experience considerably higher rates of mortality, morbidity, and preventable disease. When it comes to mental health, in particular, the Public Health Agency of Canada reports that Indigenous men are at greater risk of depression and suicide compared to that of the general population. In certain areas of Canada, Indigenous male suicide rates are 40 times that of the national average. Further, men in general are less likely than women to seek help with health issues and face barriers of accessing appropriate mental health services. As a result, men often suffer in silence. We know that these rates are devastating for many of our communities. In Canada, First Nations have suicide rates double. And in certain areas, as mentioned, 25 to 40%. In New Zealand, they're double. Similarly in Australia, and very similar data coming out of the States. So we know this is a very, very important issue that relates to all of us. And I remember stating in a speak not long ago, there's very few, if anyone, within the Indigenous community that I know that hasn't been touched by suicide. But there are long-standing histories that have led to this, and with that, some real resilience within our community in terms of solutions and courage to take on these issues, and a strength, internal strength, both with the individuals we work with and the communities that they come from. I'm going to start these questions off with Kukik Baker and ask a broader question that I think all of us will probably want to comment on. How has colonization impacted mental health in your community, Kukik? As we alluded to, there is a history behind the reason for the stats and data.
Yeah, colonization is the root cause of every issue that we see in our community. It's changed absolutely everything. Aqquimavvik was one of the last communities to form in our region. Our people who live here were very resilient, and they were relocated here, and then they didn't like it here, so they walked back to where they were from. And then they were relocated again and again, and so that was why we were one of the last communities to form in our region. We, like I said, a lot of the people were forcefully relocated more than once, and with that, when that happened, the people just shut down. There's generational trauma that especially the young generation doesn't understand. They don't know, because our elders who went through the relocations don't talk about what happened. There's that generational trauma that just keeps getting passed on to each generation, and the youngest generation have no clue why their grandparents or great-grandparents are the way that they are, and they don't understand what they went through to get here. They don't understand how our community was formed, and just lots of unsaid hurt. There's also trauma to our land, and then with all of that trauma, we get all these symptoms like addictions, lack of parenting skills, loss of culture and language. There's no communication between generations anymore. Economic disparity, like there's so much going on in our communities, which are a direct impact of colonization.
Mm-hmm. When was your community formed, Kukik? Just for clarity for the audience.
Our community was formed in 1977, but people have lived here since 1924, when the Catholic Church, I think, came in 1924. But it was like traditionally Aqquimavvik was a summer hunting ground area for the people who lived in the river system. Right. And so that's why they chose here. Especially the Hudson Bay came here, I think in 1926, because this is where everybody gathered in the summer.
I know that the settlement in Eastern Canada in the Cooccuavvik area included the killing of all the sleigh dogs in order to colonize and forcibly force people into homes, taking away their livelihood. Was that part of your colonization process?
Yeah, if they weren't slaughtered, then they were left. Like we had a elders healing weekend where one of our elders was describing being hurled into a plane. They had just finished caching 100 caribou, and as the plane was taking off, she was maybe about 5 or 6 at the time, and she was looking out the window, looking at her father's dogs that were just running around, like with nowhere to go, no masters, and she was really worried about what was going to happen to their dogs, and really worried about all that wasted meat. Like when they were dropped here in Aqquimavvik, they weren't given anything. Like what they had, the clothes on their backs, that's what they had to survive. And so all of their hunting tools, all of their clothing, all of their bedding, their tents, and everything was left behind at their camps, and all their food. And so when they were dropped here, they were literally dropped here with nothing.
Wow, talk about resilience, eh? And to see the great programming and the reclaiming that is going on there today of culture is really humbling to watch. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kukik. Kathy, can we turn to you? And from an urban perspective, very different northern than the northern perspective we just heard, but an urban, central, southern Canadian perspective. How has colonization impacted the mental health in your community?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's like Kukik. We have very much experienced similar experiences that you've had there, and but with us down south here, especially in all, I can only talk about Manitoba. I don't want to be talking for all of Canada, but you know, I think our colonization process began in around the 1870s when the treaties were signed here on the prairies, and at that time, many of our ancestors were living on the plains in teepees, of course, and living a very traditional lifestyle. And just thinking about even my own family, my family were not living like Indigenous people. They were also termed half-breeds at that time, before 1870. And my ancestors on the white European side came from a place called the Orkney Islands in northern Scotland, and they came, of course, to work with the Hudson's Bay Company in around the mid-1600s, and they came here to northern Manitoba. And so my family, particularly, I could follow them through the fur trade and through where they worked in the posts, and just see the development of Canada and the relationships that our ancestors had with the Hudson's Bay Company, it being the biggest company in Canada at that time, and a huge employer of Indigenous people. And oh, excuse me, that's one of my dogs. Oh, okay. Yeah.
All good. We like dogs.
Good. So yeah. So just looking at the journey of my own family. Through the time they came here by the mid 1600s and on, it really brought a lot of insight and understanding of what took place with our ancestors, especially those ones who worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, like my ancestors did, and all the great grandfathers and the great grandmothers. How they lived. And so when the treaties got signed in around 1870, my little family was living on a First Nation community. It was just becoming a reserve at that time, and then of course the Canadian government was also coming into the west here, and they're ready to build the railroad, and they needed land, and so there was a lot of land that was here, and my ancestors had some land through the script process, and so you either took land or you took $160. You either got 160 acres. So my little family took some money, and they also took some land, and so they eventually, by the time around, say, the 1890s, sometime that time period, for just the turn of the last century, they decided to live in a city, a little town. Actually, it was a town west of here, west of Winnipeg, and so that was where they decided to put up, raise their children. And when you look at the what I learned through that whole process was the fact that this country, excuse me, had very discriminatory practices. And I saw that in the 1901 census when I was going through it to look for my family at that time. And there's a column there that they have called race, a race column, where everybody in that town was identified. And excuse me, I got a little tick in my throat here. And so when it came to my little family, there was about 5 of them at that time. They used the term R, and R meant red. All the rest were deemed with a W, which of course meant white. And then there was a few Chinese people in the town as well, because I'm assuming they ran you call it laundries at that time, and they were termed as with a Y. So in seeing that, I thought to myself, wow, here's this little family, my ancestors living in this white town, and I was just thinking about the kind of racism that they must have experienced at that time period. And so through their journey and through, excuse me, I have dogs that are running after each other here. But anyway, and so it took me going through their own history and their background. It gave me a lot of insight onto who my ancestors were, and how all that was brought down to me. And so in around the 1920s, 1930s, my father, who is not a First Nation person, was termed a Métis, not a French Métis, but an English Métis, because of his background from the Orkney side of himself. And he ended up going to World War II in Europe, and was there as a young man. And when he came back, met up with my mother, who was also, she had left her community, her First Nation community here in northern Manitoba, came here and was working here in the city, and that's how they got together. And they started with a family, and I was born in 1949. I have an older brother who is now gone. But so from 1949, I lived here in the city. I was born here, and this is my home, but I still am connected to First Nation communities. My mother's community, and to the one that I was, when I got married, I was switched over to his community. So so in living here in the city, I definitely have experienced a lot of racism and discrimination because of who I am and what I look like. And so I saw that discrimination happening with my parents as well, and they both worked, trying to put a roof over our heads and food on the table. I mean, we were definitely not. We had, we definitely were not even the upper class or the middle class or whatever class you want to call us. But and so in going into the school system, the education system here, I would say I was very, very disadvantaged as well. You know, you look through an eyes of, you don't really know that you live in poverty, but you are, and you don't see that until, you can't afford things that other kids have. And, we're living through the 1950s and 1960s. And I think the first organization, at least the Indigenous organization that existed here in Winnipeg for us at that time in the 1960s, and it was formed in 1959, was the Winnipeg Indian Métis Friendship Center. And the Friendship Center was an organization that was to help people, families like us, in settling into the city and all that. But we were already living in the city, and I was born here. I always saw myself as a first-generation urban Indigenous person. And my kids now and my grandchildren live here in the city. And so we've all been enculturized, I guess you could say. But also, thank goodness that my mother believed in the traditional medicines and in the medicine people, and she herself would also get help for her ailments, through the. So it's a long story, but that's how kind of things ended up. And so I felt that I had to, when I finished university, that I was in my late 20s, I felt I really had to give back to the community, and I really had to help our people here in the city, many of them living in poverty. The housing here is terrible. And it just everything else that, the education system, the just programs, the health system, everything, it's all in need of, how would you say, it needs to be improved greatly. And the mental health area, really, from what I can tell, there's not a lot of research around the mental health issues for us here in the city, even though we've got access to a lot of these health services and all that. It's still it's out of our reach.
Well,
And
there's a difference to physical access and accessibility,
yes,
right?
yeah,
And equity isn't equality, right?
right.
Yeah, and I know, like one of my lineage was listed as a savage in one of the several censuses, and I just wonder, Kathy, what do you think? Knowing that history, knowing the current state of affairs, the sort of multi-generational trauma, the carrying on of the Hudson's Bay, starting with the Hudson's Bay, owning the rights to 3/4 of Canada, and having the legal right to kill people, because that was really the name, that's what they had. How do you think that impacts Indigenous mental health in urban settings today? Do you think that there's an awakening or an awareness? And what's the longer term impact of that multi-generational trauma?
Oh gosh, I think we can talk for hours on that topic, but I think for me the most thing that the area that we tackled here in the 1980s, the work that we did here in Winnipeg, was really looking at the issues of alcoholism, because and when I learned that the Hudson's Bay Company were the ones that were trading alcohol with the Cree people who, up in the northern part of Manitoba, and just how that I don't know what you want to call that, but it was
it's a shameful history. It's a shameful history they carry.
It is, yeah, and that, I think, just went on into the northern communities. And so when a lot of the folks that were moving down to Manitoba, that whole alcoholism practice that our people had, it caused many problems and issues of violence, of murders, of just
Fetal alcohol.
oh my God, you just go on and on and on about that. And so we decided in the 1980s that when we were building any kind of program or services here, that we would not promote any alcohol, to have any kind of fundraising activities that involved alcohol. And we built a housing co-op for women, and the big thing was to not have alcohol in that building. And so that was a huge problem here. Now today we've got worse problems than alcohol. We now have the drug situation going on.
Well, and co-occurring disorders are not unheard of, right? I mean,
and it causes mental health, and addictions. Holy moly,
super connected. I'm going to move. Thank you very much, Kathy. I'm going to move to David to bring just bring a bit of a U.S. Perspective, a very different perspective, I think, with different sets of social service systems. It's a different system completely, right? And while we speak about colonialism in Canada as a cultural genocide, it was in fact a near physical genocide in the States in certain areas, and survival of the fittest for quite some time. So I'd like to hear how you feel colonialism impacts mental health today, and historically, the history behind that in your community, David.
Sure. Everything that Kukik and everything that you said, we definitely have all of those lasting effects here as well. And now, as I'm looking, in terms of the context here, I really focus more in on how it affects our students, and looking in terms of student equity and the way that it now impacts basically student sovereignty, in terms of how, if I wanted to, of course we have all of the aspects that, or I guess you could say the adverse childhood experiences and the various trauma developments that have come about. But what I'm looking at in terms of how that has impacted our students and how they interact within our educational system. As both of our panelists were talking, I was thinking back about so many different things about where I come from in our community, and how all of the history that has developed and formed this community. We're comprised, as most of you are probably aware, we within the state of Oklahoma, which began as Indian Territory back in the late 1800s. And so as all of the tribes, the 39 tribes, were brought in, there were so many different variations and issues that were created within the structure of that, in terms of creating the reliance on the government, and reliance on as I was listening to Kukik, of how she was talking about how the tribes were just brought in with nothing, and that or dropped in her community. And so we had similar experiences. Every tribe has their story about how it happened, or how they were brought to this area, and then pretty much kept here in this area. And so I'm thankful that we, now, to bring it back to where we are now, that now we have, even though having all of the tribes basically brought into this area in very close proximity, now that's given us a strength, I feel, because now we have several tribes. We have primarily 7 tribes in this general area around Anadarko who we're able to not in every area, but we're able to partner, and we're able to utilize resources that helps our students. And so I'm thankful for groups like the Wichita tribe, the Kiowa tribe, the Delaware Nation, the Caddo Nation, the Comanche Nation, the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe. There's the Apaches, the Fort Sill Apache. All 7 of those groups, and 9 if you count the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. They've been very beneficial, very key partners for us in terms of helping us. And then when you look in terms of, we've been blessed to have the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board come and work with us in partnership with the Movember Foundation to help us with our suicide prevention program. And so, you know, we're just glad. I'm glad that we have these partnerships now that have helped us, because back in 2016, we had a cluster of suicides here in the area, and that's basically how we began to form partnerships together. That was, I guess you could say, that was one, not the only, but it was one of the driving forces behind us coming together and in new ways to create what we have now, which is our Hope Squad program, and so many other coalitions and groups that we now have. But I'll stop there.
Well, and I'm going to move into something that I know we're running out of time and we're not even getting past the many questions, but I'm going to move into something that you've sort of touched on, which you talk about the benefit of economy of scale and having strength in numbers, right? Having groups together, making it stronger, and I think we all have experience and can relate to that. What kind of barriers do your Indigenous youth experience when accessing mental health services in the States or in your region, David?
Oh, there's so many barriers in terms of in terms of transportation, in terms of in my mind and in my experiences within the school district, within the community, there's always a rush to diagnose or move into an area that may or may not be the right path for the student. And so that's where we're really working on looking at, I guess you could say, a holistic approach for our students, and making sure that we incorporate cultural elements within our approach, not just in the mental health area, but in the educational process, making sure that our, you know, we're still in, even though I can feel positive about where we are now, I still know that we have so much more ground to cover, so many more steps and goals to achieve in order to get where we want our students to be, and in order for them to have what they need in all areas of their life, so that they're able to be successful members of our Indigenous communities.
Right. What's the impact that COVID has had in your communities in general, and how is that connected to mental health? I know that your rates and numbers in the Indigenous community in comparison to the general US population are much higher. That's not the case in Canada as of yet, for different reasons that maybe I can turn to Kukik and Kathy to talk about. But how has that been an added barrier to access for mental health?
It's been significant. You know, we don't have the luxury. I know some reservations have been able to you know, basically close their borders, but we don't have that luxury. We're all in one big group here, and so we have had quite a few of our elders recently pass, other young, not just elders, but younger members of our community, our tribal communities in the area. And in terms of how that's affecting our students, you know, it has significant impact. Our schools are really working to provide access for technological access for hotspots and devices. But yet there are still issues and barriers with that, and that we're finding. Even just this week, we discovered 2 of our students are living in a local hotel here, but that's why, part of even though they had the devices, came to pick up the devices, they were having trouble working the devices. And after we checked on them, we knew that they needed help, and not only technical help, but they also needed help with food. They're living with their mother there. So one of the good things that we have as well, we have a program called Communities in Schools, which is designed to provide comprehensive support for our students. And so we're able to partner with them. That program came through a grant in partnership with the National Indian Education Association, and as well as the Communities in Schools of Mid-America. So we have resources, but that still, COVID has created so many issues for us in terms of being able to offer services. We're still looking. I know we had the cluster in 2016, and we recently had another young person complete a suicide here. A young lady that was a student, and she was we're trying to figure out more details, but we know that there may have been some connection with COVID, with the isolation, and because she was a virtual student, not a traditional student. And so it's just we're still exploring all of these issues. And I just met with our CIS director this morning and another director from another public school here in Oklahoma. And next week we're going to have a gathering, virtual gathering with other programs to share ideas and look at ways and share ways that we can meet all of these new challenges, because there are so many things that, everything changes daily at times with us here in the area. So we're constantly trying to share ideas and learn how to navigate in this new climate.
It's an ever-moving landscape, COVID is. Right. Kukik, I know that you in the north have had some very innovative approaches to COVID that supported both the health and the mental health of your community. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how your program responded to the surge of COVID.
So in Nunavut, we haven't had a single COVID case, which is very, very awesome for being really isolated up here. So because we didn't have any cases, we were able to do more land trips in the springtime. So we took a whole bunch of youth and men out on the land for extended, like 10-day land trips. And then when we came back from those land trips, they changed our guidelines again and said, oh no, you can't have more than 5 people in a group. And so we made smaller groups and had more of these smaller groups. So we had no more than 5 people per group going out on smaller land trips or doing traditional tool making in the shop or learning from elders. Like we wouldn't go visit the elders, but we'd have elder time either through one person who we know is not in any way sick would go do some interviews with an elder, and then we would have that interview recorded and then use that in our smaller groups. But we'd also put those interviews on our local radio station. So we had a call-in show with our elders, and so we would interview one elder and then have other elders call in and give their information or add to the topic that we were talking about. And then we also had like a time where youth and the younger generation could also call in with questions for the elders or just being able to speak their mind and be heard by our elders. We also did a Meals on Wheels activity where we would, for our men's program, people who were involved in our men's program, because our men's program was focused around food and healing, we provided small meals for the men in the program, but it also came with an activity pack. So depending on what topic they were going to be discussing that week, we would provide an activity for their family around healing or relationship building, or like just
Such innovation, Kukik. Such innovation. You know, I know that in dire times we come up with amazing solutions, eh? Like, I mean, historically that has always been the case, and I think it's quite noteworthy that, you know, when the Spanish flu came through some of the northern communities, it killed everyone. So I mean, the reality of the threat of COVID was very real for our northern folks, and I think your innovations have not just been creative, but clearly reached the need of mental health and isolation, helping kids fit and feel good in their own skin again. And you know, that cultural connection is huge, right? It's huge. I'm aware of time. I hate to bust in. I want to, on that note, maybe turn to Kathy and ask her, in terms of solutions in inner city. And Kathy, you're limited to maybe 5 minutes or less. You put your, yeah.
Sorry about that.
No. You know, as Kukik just made us aware, creativity is a big part of it, but all of it seems connected to culture and elders to some degree, right? So Kathy, you know, you've been around, you're a knowledge keeper. Where do you see culture in the solution of this?
Well, you know, some years ago, I was very fortunate to go to a ceremony that was out of the city. We had to go to one of the First Nation communities for this. A very close friend of mine, her brother had committed suicide, and this was to help the family heal spiritually. And there are ceremonies apparently that, you know, that are out there for that to happen, and for families to help with their healing. And this particular ceremony was done I'll just tell a little bit about it. It was done in the evening, and the elder and his helper had to go into the bush and bring a tree, like a long tree branch. It was a huge, like, not a branch, it was more like a trunk, a small tree trunk. All the, you know, leaves and all the branches were cleaned off of it. And then there was a special ceremony done at the elder's home before. And then what happened was the next part of the ceremony was to take that tree branch, or the tree trunk, I'll call it, and we all went, and we went to this bridge. There was a bridge close to the community there, and it was in winter, and the river was still flowing a bit by that time. And so there was a ceremony conducted, like I said, at the home, and also when we got to the bridge. And everybody, including myself, we took part of that tree trunk, and we all threw it into the river over the bridge. It went into the river. The concept was to help that man, her brother, to kind of leave this part, like they get caught up into this, you know, layer of after death, and their spirit stays there, and the idea is to help him cross over into the spirit world. And so that ceremony did that. And the elder said he had seen him, he saw him, his spirit, you know, leave that part of it, and so that was part of the healing, and the family, it helped them a lot to, you know, to realize that their brother was in a better place, for sure. So that's all I can say.
Sorry. No, thank you, Kathy. Clearly, culture is a big part of our healing.
Mhm.
It's also a big part of our moving forward and our growth. I'm going to ask you each to maybe, come up with your one sentence statement or your one thought in terms of solution going forward. Where do you see how our capacity, our resilience, and our culture come into play, and what do you see that we need to be doing collectively, individually, as communities, as multi-nations, as Indigenous people across North America here and elsewhere? What do we need to be doing collectively to support our mental health and help build that future of tomorrow that we know 7 generations, right? 7 generations we need to consider, our great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll lead this with that teaching that that is quite humbling, because it tells me that someday I will be an ancestor. And so our great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren, we need to leave this world in a place that is good for them. And that place has to that place requires balance, and it has to have balance on the land and in our communities and in our families and in ourselves. And I think we're well on the path to that. And certainly the work that all of you have been doing in your lifetimes and currently gives me steel towards that. So David, what is the thought you want to leave us with in terms of that hope for tomorrow and the solutions?
What comes to my mind is just the need for us to constantly infuse the essence of our people, the essence of our culture into every aspect of our life. That's what I work for every day. We're working to make sure that we can have that even in our schools, which that's not an easy thing, because it's a clash of concepts, and oftentimes in terms of what is most important for our students' education, not just in a formal setting, but in all aspects of their life. So that's what I would want to say, or wrap up or summarize this time with everyone here today, is just to remain consistent and intentional every day. It's basically a sum of a million little things that we do every day in our communities to help and bring this about, so that sometime down the future, in the future, when we're gone and someone is gathering for us or to remember us, maybe our ancestors are remembering us, they remember that it was someone that cared, and that we, not only just one time, but a million times all throughout their life.
Thank you, David. Kukik, 30 seconds.
Sorry.
Kukik, 30 seconds.
Okay, just going back to culture, working with the youth over the years, every time that we do culturally relevant activities and ground everything that we do in our culture, they learn who they are and they get that firm foundation, and then they are able to have healthier, happier lives, and just totally being grounded in culture is what.
Thank you, Kukik. Kathy, last 30 seconds.
Well, I like to say that the future is our young people, and if they're not well, we're gonna be having problems in the future. So it's up to all of us. I think it has to come first from ourselves. We have to also be balanced ourselves, and to be mentally strong, and then our families, my daughters, my grandchildren. also, and so in a bigger part of it, the community. Well, then, you know, we have a lot more work to do, and those young people have to carry on that work for us.
Miigwech, all of our relations. This has been so insightful, and I've been honored to listen to you and speak with you today. Thanks so much to the Mighty, and we look forward to watching the next podcast. Miigwech.